I really want people to just know that their body is just this vessel. Maybe they're going to like the way it looks sometimes, maybe not, but they can still really live a kick-ass life, know that they're a badass, and know that they're just valuable and worthy to this world.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 387 with guest Summer Innanen. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. If you are curious at all about what my home office looks like, the place that I record all of these podcast episodes, check out my TikTok. Yes, I'm on TikTok. I love TikTok. I've learned so much and been wildly entertained over there during the pandemic and forevermore. Also on Instagram, in my Instagram reels, I'm at Hey Andrea Owen on both of those platforms. And I did a short little video, I think it's like 30 seconds of my office, which has recently been redone. I'd been wanting to do it for a while and finally had a little bit of time on my hands last year, as some of us did. And I did a gallery wall that wasn't going to be like raging feminist gallery wall. That wasn't my initial plan, but alas, I couldn't help myself. You'll see some Golden Girls in there. You'll see a picture of my daughter. I love it. And then wallpaper on the other side. And I just, and I'm very lucky enough to have the resources to be able to do the wallpaper is not cheap. I didn't know. And I was like, I need how many rolls to do this wall? That seems excessive. But I guess if you want it to match up, all of that good stuff. And I love it. I love it. I spend so much time in here. And when that happens, I just feel like your physical environment matters so much. And I have been guilty of not fixing up a room until people are going to come over, or you're going to sell the house, or your parents are coming. And you're like, well, shit, I guess we should probably hang some stuff on the walls. Or, fix that thing that's been broken. I've done that many times. And then you're like, why didn't I do this before? It's so nice. That's sort of how I feel about my home office. It's been a slow process. So if you want to go check that out, go over to my reels on Instagram or my TikTok. Hey, Andrea Owen, I'm over there and you can check it out. Also, if you are feeling like you could, I don't know, you guys know me. Springtime always makes me feel like I'm being reborn. And if that's you, if you feel like you could use some support, you want to make some changes in your life, we have some openings for private coaching. I was on a consult call with a prospective client a couple of weeks ago. And I thought, it might be interesting for me to tell people what happens during those calls. First, you fill out an application. If you go over to AndreaOwen.com, did you hear that? AndreaOwen.com. More on that in a second. AndreaOwen.com/apply. There's an application. We get that application, we check it out, and it's not always a great fit. More often than not, yes, we are going to refer you to either get on the phone with me or one of my lead coaches, either Liz or Sabrina, and then we go from there and we set up a call. And so I'm talking to this woman and she had filled out her application. I had more questions based on some of the things that she wrote. I come from a place of curiosity. Tell me more about this. Say more about that. What do you mean by this? Tell me what this looks like in your life when you talk about this struggle. So the client tells me more, and then I tell you, this is how I do it personally, whether or not I think I can help you. Sometimes I can't. And it's clear that it's more of a therapy topic. And I will say, you know what? I think this would be enormously helpful for you to process all of this with a therapist. But I know pretty much from the first few minutes if it's something that is in my zone of genius and that I can help the client with. Here's the thing too, is that yes, there's going to be some aha moments when we are on the phone together or on Zoom together, but a lot of the work happens in between. I give assignments. We co-create these assignments together. You do them. And that's where the magic and the change happens. And I want you to be equipped with the tools to be able to do the work on your own in your life going forward. I don't want you to need me forever. If you need me forever, that means I'm not doing my job. Personally, that's how I view it. And I do also believe that we can use different coaches and therapists throughout our life because everyone has their specialty. Everyone has a different personality. They are trained differently. P.S. Also hire a coach who's trained. A little side note. And let's see if we can make some magic. AndreaOwen.com/apply. Yes, we are moving everything over from Your Kick-Ass Life to Andrea Owen. I want to emphasize that there is no S on the end of my last name. Anybody out there with a last name that people get it wrong because the other spelling of it is a common last name as well. So my maiden name was Fry, which honestly I feel like I should have just kept, but I didn't. And it was Fry. A lot of people put an E on the end of it, which I didn't really care because it doesn't change the pronunciation of it. It's Fry either way. It's common with an E. It's common without an E. We were a without an E family. But when people say Owens, I'm like, absolutely not. No. And my husband's like, I've been dealing with this my entire life. Anyway, AndreaOwen.com/apply if you want to apply for one-on-one coaching. Speaking of interesting last names, our guest today is Summer Innanen. And we had such an amazing conversation about diet culture, which is something I love to talk about. I succumbed to diet culture for decades, probably 3.5 decades, and am unlearning all of the internalized things that never served me. And maybe you can relate. We also talk about body image, a little bit of intersectional feminism in there as well. So for those of you that don't know her, let me give you a quick introduction. Summer Innanen is a professionally trained coach specializing in body image, self-worth, and confidence. She helps people all over the world to stop living behind the numbers on their scales through her private and group coaching at summerinnanen.com. She is the best-selling author of Body Image Remix and creator of You on Fire, the online group coaching program dedicated to helping people get free from body shame and live life on their own terms. She is also the host of Eat the Rules, a podcast dedicated to anti-dieting, body image, and intersectional feminism. So without further ado, here is Summer. Summer, welcome to the show.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to have this conversation. As I was telling you before we started recording, I have such a passion for this topic, but many times don't feel researched enough and well versed in all of the things. And I think that things are changing quickly in terms of what our culture is understanding and becoming aware of around diet culture and body image and body positivity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm super excited to have you on. I want to jump kind of, not so much in the deep end yet, but can you give a brief description for people that may be new to the term of what diet culture is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to kind of like paraphrase something that Virgie Tovar, who wrote the book, The Right to Remain Fat. She's an incredible fat activist. She sort of describes it as like the culture where, everyone talks about food in terms of good or bad, and they feel guilty if they eat something. And, that kind of just the way that we sort of look at food through this moral lens. And it's all really connected to this belief that being thinner is better and being bigger is bad. And so the entire culture sort of revolves around these fat phobic beliefs, which are also rooted in sexism and racism and everything else, all the different various layers of oppression. that cause us to feel like there's something wrong with our body, and that in order to fix it, we need to always be in the pursuit of thinness and always be dieting. And that sort of transpires into our entire culture with the way that we interact and behave around food and exercise and everything else. So that's kind of like a very short summation of it.
It sounds a little bit like Lindy West is someone that I follow. I've read her books, and
Yes.
she was on NPR. It's been a handful of years, and I feel like the title of it was something like Coming Out as Fat or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll put the link in the show notes. It was really good. And she's talking about this. And one of the things that struck me is she said that for so long she felt like she was only a good fat person if she was actively trying to lose weight. And she would, it made her friends more comfortable. And I might be misquoting her. It might not have been her friends, but it made other people more comfortable if she was telling them that she was on some kind of diet or doing something to not be fat anymore. And she was done with it.
Yeah, yeah. That's the whole, like, it's called in fat activism spaces, it's called like the good fatty paradigm. And it's like, it's kind of acceptable to be fat as long as you're trying to be thinner. And I think that permeates into our existence, regardless of our body size. Obviously, like if you're in a larger body, it's much more significant. But we're all sort of born into this world, particularly as women, or people who identify as female, it's your purpose in life to be smaller. It's like, if you're not trying to lose weight, well, what's wrong with you? Like, of course, everybody wants to lose weight. And it's such a damaging paradigm, and it's such a damaging belief system that we inherit that makes us constantly feel like our body is never good enough, and that we're inherently never good enough.
And then our value is most definitely at the top of the list of things that make women valuable is the size and shape of our body and our appearance as well. And I know that men struggle with this too, but I do think that women have a unique way of struggling about it. What do you think?
Oh, yes, 100%. I think it's because so much of this is rooted in sexism and in the belief that, our worthiness is in our desirability. And so that really comes from, like, that's in our DNA. Our survival as women depended on us being likable, and that equates to being desirable. Like our survival literally depended on that before we had any kind of independence. And so that's kind of wired into our DNA. And so for us, it's a lot more significant because it comes down to like our survival, like, and our lovability and my desirability and my success and everything about that I think that, men definitely struggle with body image, but for women, it's just like, it's like a near universal condition.
It's at the forefront, of our lives.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. This is another topic for another time, but I've been reading more about internalized patriarchy and misogyny. And it's fascinating. And it definitely is one of those things you can't unsee it once you see it. So I'm just telling everybody listening, you might want to do a quick Google search and your life's going to change for the better.
Yeah.
But there's first a little bit of whiplash around how we have participated in this so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think it's such a helpful framework for then understanding, why we compare ourselves to others, or why we judge other women and things like that. Like that's all really rooted in internalized misogyny and internalized sexism. And I think it's almost like a more helpful framework, because instead of seeing it as like this internal defect, we can look and see, okay, it's actually like the way that I've been conditioned, that some of these behaviors and beliefs that I have are because of this conditioning, versus like I'm defective and there's something wrong with me, which is something that I always try to really instill in people. And it's that like none of these thoughts or beliefs are your fault.
Exactly. No self-blame, or, if there is any, try to lean on some self-compassion. But also I think for me, it really put under the microscope the stereotypes that we as women face around being backstabbing and catty and gossiping and those types of things, and where they originated from. I even looked at the science around it. Super fascinating. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off track, but I want to ask you, because you talk about how the way to feel better in your body isn't necessarily about liking the way you look, and how trying to do that can make it harder to accept ourselves. So can you talk about that for a minute?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that, when you sort of look at like mainstream body positivity or body image advice, you sort of get this understanding that like, okay, we should just all like love our bodies and embrace our
Mm-hmm.
cellulite and all this stuff. And I sort of find that messaging, I mean, that messaging is
That's a huge
obviously
ask.
it's a lot. I mean, it's better than the like, diet culture or fat
Mm-hmm.
phobic messaging, but I still find it kind of problematic because it's keeping the focus on our body. It's keeping the focus on finding ourselves attractive. And, like I said, when we've been told that our worthiness is dependent on being attractive, then we're still kind of upholding that belief system. What I want for people is to know that they are good enough regardless of how they look. I want them to be able to look in the mirror and maybe like what they see or not, and still know that they're inherently good enough and be able to go on with their day and know that they are of value to this world. And that's like a very, very liberating place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the other issue I take with sort of this, like, trying to like the way you look is that, I mean, it's for one, it's also kind of unrealistic, especially when we know like we're all going to age out of beauty standards.
Right.
So if we're constantly sort of measuring ourselves through the perception of beauty standards, even if those beauty standards evolve and change and start showing people in larger bodies, we're still kind of hinging it on like whatever that beauty standard is in that moment. And it creates this kind of like unrealistic expectation that we're then hinging our self-worth on something that's still very external. And I want us
Mm-hmm.
to really know that our worthiness doesn't come from any of these external things. It comes from who we are and knowing that who we are is valuable and worthy. And the other problem I see is just that I have people who come to me and they feel bad for feeling bad about their body. They're like, I know
Yeah.
I should love my body, or I know I shouldn't care how my stomach looks. And I'm like, no, like you don't feel bad for feeling bad. Don't beat yourself up for beating yourself up.
I call that the ultimate ass kicker, beating yourself up for beating
Yes.
yourself up. Yep. I see that a lot.
Yes. And it's putting this other, like, this other expectation on ourselves that is piling onto this already huge mountain of expectations that we have on ourselves. And so I like people to just kind of drop that expectation at the door. I don't want people thinking they need to like the way they look or that they're going to think that they're hot. Like, that's not the work I do with people. I really want people to just know that their body is just this vessel. Maybe they're going to like the way it looks sometimes, maybe not, but they can still really live a kick-ass life, know that they're a
Mhm.
badass, and know that they're just valuable and worthy to this world.
I'm kind of a little speechless over here because I'm thinking about, and I'm just going to be really candid for a second. I'm thinking about what I make up this being for many a lifelong process to unlearn and undo what we have, how we've been conditioned to behave with dieting, what we've been conditioned to think, and how we've been conditioned to feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. I feel like
Absolutely.
you are never going to go out of business. Like you're
Well, I
always
mean,
going
it
to
would
have
be
clients.
great if I did because it would
Right.
mean
That's the
everybody
goal
feels.
in a strange
But
way.
I have some clients that are like approaching 70. I have some that are very young.
Yeah.
And like the thing that I've noticed is that it doesn't matter how long you've been in it. Like you can still unlearn it. And I
Yes.
think
I
that
believe that.
but it is a practice. Like I also like to tell people that acceptance is not a destination. It's not this place where you wake up one day and you're just like, I accept my body. Everything's fine. Like, that's it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
done.
Mm-hmm.
It's really this ongoing practice of always kind of meeting yourself where you're at, accepting that there's parts of you that you don't like, parts of you that you do like, welcoming those parts in that you don't like, healing those parts that are showing
Yeah.
up that are creating issues. Like, it's an ongoing practice. It's like, how are you going to show up and accept yourself today versus this destination that we get to? And so it can be kind of like it's like a lifelong way of living that's about being there for you and treating yourself with kindness, compassion, and trust and respect.
I am super glad that people are even talking about this nowadays. And we definitely see some arguing going on the internet about, there's the camp of people who think it is their job to judge someone's health based on the size of their body. It's, oh,
Mm-hmm.
so I have an interesting background. I don't know if you know this is about me, but I'll be brief. I went to college for exercise physiology. This was around 2005 to 2007-ish. It took a long time to graduate because my life fell apart. At any rate, that was during the quote unquote obesity epidemic, when it was all over the news. And what was interesting when I look back on this is that we looked at research in a handful of my classes that body size does not equate health. And they were looking at someone who would, not someone, but like a subject of people who would be classified as even obese, but their stats were healthier than other people. And I remember one of my professors talking about this, and he was so matter of fact about it. But we quickly switched over to it. It's almost as if that topic kind of got swept under the rug a little bit. And then we went back to talking about how exercise is weight loss, that's kind of the ultimate thing. And I'm not articulating this very well. And I think part of it is because it's traumatizing to be educated in this particular topic that is so weighted for women and a lot of people, and then walk away from it. And I walked away from the fitness industry because I felt like it was toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's complicated, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And it's complicated not just for people who went to college for anything around weight or food or fitness or any of that. Switching gears a little bit, I wanted to give a personal anecdote of something that's currently happening. And I'm sure you've seen it if you're on social media, how, skinny jeans are out and the flared jeans are coming back in. And there's this whole argument about bringing back low-waisted jeans. And I about died because I was like, absolutely not. No, no, no. So I was in my mid-20s when those were popular, but yeah. I feel validated that there's so many women talking about how that created those jeans, that style of jeans created such disordered eating for them. Mm-hmm. Or just anyway, I feel like I'm not being articulate at all. And it's probably because I'm like, ugh.
Yes. Well, yes. The height of my own disordered eating was when those jeans were most popular.
Oh gosh. It's not good memories.
Yeah. But I mean, just like besides the point, it's like, are there like, where are the Gen Z men telling the millennial men what they should be wearing? Like, I just think the whole thing is like such bullshit.
Well, those jeans were made for like one body type. When Paris Hilton was, and Nicole Richie and Britney Spears were like 17, and they are the worst. I will never wear them again. And I'm mostly upset because my daughter's 11, and I'm like, absolutely not, no. And besides, like your butt crack shows, it's just kind of, it's not that cute. And sometimes like pubic hair, they're so
I mean, it's just wear what you want to wear. Like,
right.
wear what you
want to wear.
Wear what's comfortable.
High-waisted is so much more comfortable.
I mean, I would agree with that, but I'm
all about the mom jean.
Like slow-waisted, but
yeah.
We have very different body types. But I just, I do want to circle back to something because you're talking about weight science. And I think it's really important for people to know the truth about weight science. Like you mentioned kind of reading all these studies that suggested that you could be in a higher BMI, which the BMI is kind of arbitrary and based on,
oh my God,
like that's a whole other conversation.
Make it go away.
But like for people who want to learn more, like there's a couple of really good books like Body Respect by Lindo Bacon, as well as Anti-Diet by Christy Harrison. Like those books really go into the nuts and bolts of all of that research, what it really says. And so I always encourage people who are still really struggling with that, like, can you be healthier in a larger body? Like all that to if they're struggling with that belief system to read the research, because it's so important, and to read it by people who can put it in layman's terms for you, because you can get lost in the weeds. But it's just, I think that's like, I didn't want to just leave that hanging there because you did bring it up. And I think that that's so important, because we think that our like one of the aspects of our worthiness is also health, right? Like in our culture, it's like, oh, well, you should be healthy as long as they're healthy. And it's like, your health is your business. It's not entirely within your control, but it's also up to, like, that's your bodily autonomy. It's your decision. It's no one else's business. And as a culture, like, we need to stop, commenting on people's bodies, commenting on their
Right.
health, and know that like someone else's health is entirely, it's their business. It's not up to us unless they've invited us into the doctor's office with them to give our opinion. We need to just take the back seat there, because the whole like kind of concern trolling thing, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, is so harmful for people. It's not helpful in any way. It just makes them feel more ashamed, and the impact of weight stigma is greater on someone's health. Like it's a greater detriment to someone's health than being in a larger body, and that's really important to understand.
Yes to all of that. And I want to ask you, because this is also something that we hear a lot in our society, is people assume that if you accept your body and maybe it is a larger size, or perhaps a woman has gained weight as she's gotten older, or gained weight if she's had a child or children, that she's essentially giving up and not taking care of herself. She's let herself go. What is your response to that?
Well, other than like just sheer rage.
Other than punching them in the face. Yeah.
I have so many responses to this, but I think it's like, we really have to look at like, if you stop dieting, what are you really giving up on? You're giving up on, a culture that, that values certain bodies over others. You're giving up on deprivation. You're giving up on, decreased mental health, chronic stress, like limited social interactions. Like what you're really giving up on, what you're really letting go of, is all of these things that are extremely harmful to both your physical and mental health. And the other thing that when we talk about like acceptance is really the practice of treating yourself with kindness, compassion, and respect. Like that's literally the opposite of giving up. Like when people kind of challenge, or they have hesitations towards accepting their body, they're like, well, like I'm afraid I won't look after myself. And I'm like, I'm teaching you how to treat yourself with kindness, care, and compassion. It's literally the opposite of giving up. And so I think that's just like a really important reframe for people to keep in mind. Diet culture has taught us that if we're not dieting, we're giving up. But who profits off of us believing that? The diet companies, because we keep coming back for more if we think that, if we believe that. Whereas like if we could really break free of that, we'll see that what we're truly giving up on is this really, really harmful system. And when it comes to taking care of yourself, I mean, that is such an individual thing. I mean, sometimes taking care of myself looks like sitting on the couch and eating Oreos. Sometimes taking care of myself looks like going on a walk or going to the gym. Like it's just, it taking care of yourself, we have to look at it beyond just putting food in your mouth and exercising. We have to look at it as our emotional, our mental, and our physical well-being, knowing that sometimes we're prioritizing one of those over another, and that's a really kind way to look after yourself. And so I really try to help people understand and form like a new definition of what taking care of yourself means to you. And it's really about like honoring your body's needs, tuning into what feels best for you, what's going to be the most nourishing for you, and it's almost like the way that you look after like a child, we're able to kind of figure out what their needs are and take care of them. And no one is like making their kid exercise all the time and like, or at least I hope not, and depriving them of food and stuff. We have to kind of like reparent ourselves when we're taking care of ourselves, and really give ourselves the same kind of kindness and grace and compassion that we would give to somebody that we love. And so I hope that helps people like see it differently and know that you can be healthy emotionally, physically, and mentally by just looking after yourself in a way that feels best for you, and having it completely detached from whether something is going to make you gain or lose weight, and just tuning into what your body actually needs. And that's really what I want people to be doing.
I love that reframe. And I also love Oreos. So I will sit on the couch with you, Summer, and we can eat Oreos together, watch Netflix. You were talking about stopping dieting, and I've had many conversations with various female friends on here. I've had podcast episodes. I have a series called Conversations About Shit That Matters with Unqualified People, where we've talked about this topic in our own journey, into our 40s. And one of the things that I stopped doing So this was it was a few years ago. So it was around the time that my father passed away in 2016. I decided to stop exercising and I don't recommend this. I'm not saying everybody has a personal choice, because of someone who had been immersed in that industry. And also because I had to look in the mirror and admit to myself that I had never exercised and the top priority, the top reason that I was doing it was to take care of my body and move my body and do it for my mental health and well-being. It was solely to keep my body a certain shape and size.
Mm-hmm.
That was the main reason that I was exercising. And I wasn't even necessarily punishing myself with exercise like I had done in my 20s. I had definitely gone down that route and was participating in some very dangerous behaviors around eating and exercising, or I should say lack of eating. However, I was 41 and I was just done, Summer. I just was, and I knew it wasn't permanent, but I just knew I had to go through some stuff emotionally, and I gained weight and also went to the doctor, and she told me my cholesterol was high. And I was like, damn, okay. So they're not lying when they say diet and exercise matters.
Well, stress is really connected to cholesterol too, though. And if your father
and it
passed
wasn't
away,
it wasn't hugely, like dangerous. But anyway, I after 2 years, I started exercising again, and I can say that I have seen a massive difference in I have chronic anxiety, in my own mental health. So I do it now because honestly, I really love it. I love the kind of exercise that I do. I wouldn't do it if I hated it. And it makes me feel better. But I am 2 pant sizes bigger than I was 10 years ago. And I'm like, I just am so happy that I can afford to buy bigger pants and bigger underwear. Like that's really, and it's taken me a long time to get to that place where I'm just like, okay, I'm 45 and I'm bigger than I was, and my body's happy. I genuinely feel like my body is happy.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, that's an awesome place to be. And it's important.
It feels revolutionary. Like I'm not gonna lie, it feels revolutionary. Someone, in her 20s who had disordered eating, and it was an eating disorder. Like it very well could have killed me had it kept going. And it's very scary. And that was my way of quitting dieting, because I felt like it was a form of dieting, exercising to keep my body a certain size.
It is.
And it's totally different now. I'm not saying I don't have moments where, I see someone who my age who's super fit, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could be like that. But then I'm like, no, I don't want to put in all the effort it takes to be like that. Yeah. I love Oreos. Like,
well, yeah. I mean, I think it's like, that's the thing, is that when you're engaging in all that stuff, you have to look at the time, energy, and money that it takes away from you. Like diet culture literally steals our time, energy, and money. And
so much energy.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. Like when I work with people is when we start to kind of close out our time together, when they finish a program with me, they're like, I just have so much more mental space. Like I just feel so much more calm. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like that's what we want, because it's this constant chatter that we're sort of experiencing. And like, especially as women, like we, our purpose in this world is so much bigger. Like we have so much more potential if we're not wasting our time and energy, like hating our body and dieting. And I'm not saying, again, that's not your fault. It's not a personal defect at all, but we can reject it. And like, what's possible is reclaiming that. And then you can go on to do like really amazing things. Whether that, like I've had some clients that one went on to like volunteer at a rape crisis center. I had another one who went on to become a foster parent, like just all these like really amazing things that, we can do when we have that mental space back. Or maybe it just means being more present with your kids. Like that's also very important. But it's just, like it's such a waste. And when it comes to healing your relationship with exercise, like that, I was an exercise addict. I definitely, that was like my main coping mechanism. Was over exercising, and I had to as well take like a very big hiatus from the stuff that I was doing to completely detach that from like the pursuit of thinness to come back and really be able to just take my ego out of it and listen to my body and do what I really liked and what felt good for me. And it's such a better place to be, isn't it? Like to just be able to move your body because it feels good, and
that's
rest
why
it
I
'cause
said that it
feels
felt
good.
revolutionary. And I'm not being dramatic when I say that. It felt like a completely different mindset. Even to say mindset doesn't feel like it does it justice. How different. I almost feel like I got a part of my brain removed that was obsessed with the size of my pants and all the things that are related to that. And it is so freeing. Again, I'm not saying that it's perfect. I still have moments where I'm like, whoa, get a little squirrely, but for the most part, it is totally different. And I definitely, it's my own personal experience. And that's why I like having people like you on who know the science. But I do think it is such a unique journey for every woman. And women listening are probably on all different parts of the spectrum, just starting to understand what diet culture is and their eyes opening up to that. Two women have worked on it a lot, all of it. And I just want to say that wherever you are is exactly where you need to be. And I want to ask you too, directly related to what you were just talking about, is that you say that dieting and picking apart and fixating on your body are what you call tools of avoidance. So is that what you mean by what you were just talking about regarding like the mental space, or is it something else?
It's kind of sort of. Well, a little bit. We can tie them together. So
yeah. Tell us.
Yeah. So I think that so a couple things. Dieting and fixating on our body are really coping mechanisms. Like they're ways that we deal with other emotions and traumas in our life, and because they're easier to fixate on. It becomes something that we can problem solve. It feels like something that we can control versus a lot of the other stuff that we're experiencing that we can't control, and that feels really anxiety inducing. A lot of people don't like to feel their feelings, and fixating on your body is a really good way to avoid feeling your feelings and getting to the kind of the deeper stuff that's really going on underneath. And to give you just a bit of an example, like you mentioned your dad passing away. My dad passed away like a year and a half ago. Yeah, a year and a half ago. I really hadn't had a lot of moments of body shame leading up to that. But when he passed away, like I remember just about a month afterwards, I was like really starting to like fixate on my body again and all of that stuff. And I was able to just take a step back and be like, okay, like what's actually going on here, Summer? And I was like, okay, well, I've got this, like my world had just exploded. Like it was sudden, it was traumatic. Like it was just this whole thing that happened when he passed away. And it was, and so my go-to coping mechanism has always been to fixate on my body. It's a way to kind of like soothe and avoid feelings. And so I was able to like take a step back and be like, okay, no, it's not about my body in this situation. It's really about this overwhelming grief and everything else that I'm experiencing at this time. But on like even on a smaller scale, I noticed this with people, even if just they're having like a conflict with their partner or anxieties about work, or the pandemic has brought this up big time for people. They've been fixating on their body more or having these urges to diet because it gives them the sense of control.
Something to do.
Yeah, it's like we medicate ourselves with dieting to kind of try and soothe and fix our feelings, which is another reason why it's so hard to break free of dieting, because it is so addictive. It is this thing that like keeps us coming back because it gives us this like dopamine hit. It gives us this sense of control. And so it's really hard to let go of that, because we're sort of left with like sometimes a lot of these more difficult feelings underneath that we've been really trying to avoid, like maybe loneliness or rejection or hurt or anxiety. And so that's something that I always encourage people to look at, is that if you are having a moment where you're experiencing body shame, to really look at like, what else am I actually experiencing right now? What emotions are going on in my life with myself? And try to really identify those, because a lot of times like it's not about your body. It's about this other stuff that we're experiencing. And so I guess to tie it back to the point of like freeing up mental space, I mean, sometimes it just frees up mental space to be able to look at like what's really going on underneath and to really feel the feelings that are happening underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of like avoiding those and pushing them down and trying to diet our way through them, to be able to sit with them and acknowledge them and move through them.
Yeah. Yes. And it's interesting when I wrote How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, there are 14 unhealthy coping mechanisms is what those are. And I knew that dieting was one of them, but I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
write about it because I'm not an expert in that. But I'm glad that you brought that up because yes, it is. And it's directly tied to perfectionism and overachieving and
Yeah.
control, like all of those that I wrote
Mm-hmm.
about. So yeah, thank you for pointing to that about it being a coping mechanism that we're used to doing it since we were very young.
Yes.
A lot of
Yes.
practice.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
And we've seen our
People.
mothers do it many times, not always, but many times.
Oh, I mean, everyone I work with has other mothers too. Yes. But
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's like one of those things that people talk about like emotional eating. And I'm like, can we just talk about emotional dieting instead? Because that's the bigger problem. Like, and that's what
Yeah.
leads to people thinking they're emotionally eating, but really they're usually just like having kind of like responsive eating to restriction. But that's another story. But anyways, I just think it's like one of those under recognized things that because again, it's just so accepted in our society to be dieting, but really it is such a like it's like emotional dieting. That's what it is.
I'm guessing, I don't want to assume that you do possibly get clients who they're overweight and it is affecting their health. Maybe it's like putting pressure on their joints or something is actually going on that their doctor that they trust has said like, yeah, you should probably consider losing, 20, 25 pounds. My first part of that question is, does that ever happen? And then B, how do you work with someone with creating a balance to be able to do that without fixating on it and kind of working with really the whole culture of fat phobia? I know that was a
Mm-hmm.
huge question that I
Yeah, no,
just
it's really
asked.
good. I think it's like, and it's a common concern that people have because we've learned, I'm not saying this is true, but we've learned that there's a lot of like health complications with being in a larger body, which is a lot of that has been like, again, if you read about weight
Mm-hmm.
science, it's not necessarily true, but first of all, I don't use the word overweight. I use the word like larger bodied or if
Okay.
someone self-identifies as fat, because overweight is based on the BMI, which we know is arbitrary and like just complete bullshit.
Well, and
And
you make a
so,
great point. I want to pause there and apologize if I've offended anyone listening, because that points to that there is a normal, also AKA
yes,
good weight, and any
yes.
weight that is outside of that, we usually don't talk about, underweight as being bad from a, society, the way it looks standpoint. But yes,
Yeah.
point taken. And thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's totally fine. I think it's like it's really common, right? But it is in essence like kind of stigmatizing language because it's really referring to like the body as being diseased. And that's like
Mm-hmm.
how like that's so stigmatizing. And so so that's I just wanted to mention that for people and because even to just take that out of your own language repertoire can be really powerful in starting to rewire beliefs that you have. But when someone's doctor tells them that they need to lose weight to manage a certain condition, like there's a few different ways to go about it. First of all, if you look at all of the research, there is not one diet that works in the long term for the majority of individuals. So 88% of individuals are going to gain the weight back plus more, and a lot of them plus more. And so, until there is a proven form of losing weight, like what we're really recommending to people actually becomes more harmful. And so what I recommend people do instead is try to find a doctor that is going to be more aligned with the health at every size approach, which is an approach to health that looks at focusing on health behaviors versus weight loss as the outcome. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you can still make changes to your diet and make changes to what you're eating or make changes to how you are treating, like what you're doing to your body, whether that's sleep or movement or stress. but taking the outcome of weight out of the equation and looking at managing health through that lens and that perspective. And there's a lot of amazing registered dietitians that work with people in that. So I'm always recommending that to people if they do want someone to give them like a specific recommendations on how to manage a health condition without it being tied to weight loss, because in the long term, that's usually more detrimental to someone's well-being and someone's health. And the other thing that, you can say to your doctor is like, what would you recommend to a thin person? Because there is not one health condition that only people in larger bodies get, that people in thin bodies get all the same conditions. And so doctors aren't recommending weight loss to them. There's ways to manage these conditions without it being about weight. I think it requires a bit of education on an individual's part. It requires a bit of like it's hard, right? Because you kind of have to advocate for yourself, which is really, really hard for people, especially if you experience discrimination and stigma. But there's a lot more resources available online now to point you to practitioners who can help you and are going to treat you with the respect and dignity that you deserve. And I think that's really critical to understand. Did you feel like that answered it?
Yeah, yes, it did. And I have this really strange feeling that this episode is going to piss some people off. I don't know why.
Well,
not based on anything.
They should come listen to my podcast. So I'll really fan
really
their
fuck them
flames.
up. No, I feel like maybe just irritate some people, and for whatever reason. But I think the last question I want to ask you that you can speak to is, what is the biggest argument or pushback that you get from people when they might be newer to this conversation?
I think that like people feel like I'm attacking them for wanting to lose weight, and like that's not what I'm doing at all. Like I do not want anyone to feel ashamed.
People get pretty defensive
for wanting to lose weight, or they feel bad, and I think that like all that I'm talking about here is treating all bodies with dignity and respect, and I really hope that ultimately people can get on board with that. Like, do you want all bodies to be treated with dignity and respect? Then we have to, look at treating people in all body sizes the same way and giving them that same treatment. And so I think that, any kind of pushback is generally just like, it's challenging these, this kind of conditional bias that we have, and really shaking this belief system that we've maybe invested a lot of time and energy in within ourselves. And that's really hard for people. I'm not telling people to go out and be unhealthy. I'm telling you the exact opposite. I'm telling you again to go and care for yourself in a way that feels good for you, in a way that is really about honoring your body and who you are, instead of punishing who you are and coming at it from a punitive perspective. And so, yeah, but just circling back to like, I would never want anyone to feel ashamed for wanting to lose weight. That's an innocent response to living in a culture that demonizes larger bodies and praises thinner bodies. I think that it's totally natural to want that. It's totally normal to participate in that. But I also think that, if it's taking time and energy from you, if you feel like your self-worth is really conditional on maintaining a certain body size or being in a smaller body, then there's another way forward that can give you a lot more freedom and liberation. And so I hope that it doesn't piss people off. I hope it actually just opens their mind and that they're on board with this notion of like, let's be respectful to all bodies, especially in this day and age.
And not to anything that you said. I do feel like I talked about myself a little bit too much, which I try not to center myself and make it about me. I have, I think, so much personal experience in this that still feels a little bit that it rises to the surface when we talk about it. Yeah. And I lied. I have one more question. Yeah. Because I know that part of your work revolves around intersectional feminism, and that's important to you. So I'm curious, in your words, how would you describe how diet culture is directly related to both patriarchy and white supremacy?
Ooh, okay. That's a big question.
I know, right? And the floor is yours, Summer. Now we're really going to piss some people off.
Oh my gosh. Well,
it's my show. I can ask what I want.
And here's the thing, like, okay, so I come from a place of privilege, so I'm probably not even the best person to be answering this. So I'm going to refer to a few people and a few resources for people to read more. I know you've had Sonia Renee Taylor on your show. She is probably,
I love her. Yes.
like, my number one, that book, The Body Is Not an Apology. Like, I would go there.
So
yeah.
Her
Yeah.
Hey
So
Y'all videos on Instagram are so good. I repost them to my stories all the time.
Yeah, like, so that's, I mean, I'm referring people to her work all the time because she is an activist and she is Black and she's in a larger body. And it's just, I think that's who we need to be listening to and centering in discussions, especially as it relates to the intersections of these things. But you know, like the thinness and beauty ideals are really rooted in like Eurocentric beauty standards. So it's the beauty standards are really white, thin, young, you know, and so yeah, and so it's racist, like, you know, point blank. And there's a really
classist. To be able to afford to be that way.
100%. And there's a really good book called Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings, which really goes into the depth of where beauty standards came from and how they were rooted in white supremacy. It's a very detailed book. So again, like, that's another resource for individuals to look into if they want to see more. But I think that from like a very kind of basic and surface level, just look at who's represented in the media and what bodies are really valued and which ones are kind of framed up as the ideal. And if the vast majority is, again, like, you know, thin, white, cis, young, and so that's all, that's not what everybody looks like, right? And so, and again, it's coming down to this idea that, like, in order for you to be worthy, you have to be desirable, you have to be attractive to the male gaze. And so I always like to say to people, I'll leave this quotable for you, but it's like, your purpose in life is not to give somebody a boner. You know, and so
I can't wait to tell my daughter that.
Yeah,
not yet. She's only 11,
but it's true, right? But that's where, like, the connection with the patriarchy comes, and it's because it really steals our time, energy, and money. Like, when we're fixating on our bodies and trying to look a certain way, we're not participating in the culture. We're not actively, like, trying to
giving our opinions, and
exactly. We're told to be small and just, you know, be pretty, and like, everything else, it doesn't matter. And so it's all very much connected, and that's like a very brief way of saying it. But I would really look to people who are the ones in the marginalized bodies talking about this stuff to really understand it further, because they have the lived experience.
We'll drop those links in the show notes, and I appreciate you referring to them. And I have so loved this conversation. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me talk about myself so much. Sorry, listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Well, tell everyone where to go to find out more about you and what you offer.
Sure. So the best place to find me is if you go to thebodyimagecoach.com. That will take you to my website, which is summerinnanen.com. So in case you can't spell it, just go to thebodyimagecoach.com. I have a podcast called Eat the Rules. And on my website, there's a free 10-day body confidence makeover that will kind of set you on this path if you're interested in learning more.
I love the name of your podcast, Eat the Rules. That is so incredibly perfect. And thank you so much for being here. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And you know how grateful I am for your time. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye, everyone.